let's keep it tonight.
You mean even if we can't take action?
Well, I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll do public comment now.
Good evening. I'm Dave Ellis, a resident of the 7th Ward, and I'm glad to be able to comment.
Recording in progress.
Okay. I'm still Dave Ellis, still a resident of the 7th Ward, and I'm glad I'm able to comment this evening. My comments will be addressing pension funding. I was here last month and talked about a couple things I'd like to follow up a little bit more and hopefully push some action. I'm going to go back to the Blue Ribbon Committee report, which was 15 years ago. On page 4, it talks about, in the bottom paragraph, it says, what about the city manager? This is in 2008. What about the city manager, finance manager, city council, and mayor? Were they asleep at the switch? These professional and elected officials were being told that the plans were well-funded, the assumptions were reasonable, that the adverse trends would reverse, and even over time resulting in improved funding status. Hindsight tells us that had more questions been asked and more information been sought, city officials might have chosen to increase funding at an earlier time to mitigate the depth.
I think the council chambers is on mute.
Oh, you can't hear anything?
We're working on it, thank you.
Should I hold up here? Or?
Sure, why don't you hold up a second?
Can you hear us now? Microphone check.
Yes, I can hear now.
Hello?
That one too?
Okay,
Hello?
yeah.
Yes, we can hear you, or I can hear you.
Do you want to start over?
Yeah, I will.
Go-
Thank
please,
you very
please
much,
do.
Mr. Livingston. My name's Dave Ellis. I'm a resident of the 7th Ward, and I'm here tonight to speak about pension funding. And I would like to address some of the comments from the Blue Ribbon Committee, which met and produced a report 15 years ago in 2008. I'm going to read the bottom paragraph of page 4 of their report. What about the city manager, finance manager, city council, and mayor? They were asleep at the switch? Question mark. These professional and elected officials were being told that the plans were well-funded, the assumptions were reasonable, that the adverse trends would reverse, and even over time resulting in improved funding status. Hindsight tells us that had more questions been asked and more information been sought, city officials might have chosen to increase funding at an earlier time to mitigate the depth of the current crisis. Yet we want to be clear that we found no evidence of any wrongdoing or malfeasance. We clearly assert that the buck starts and stops with the council and the mayor, and ultimately they are ultimately responsible for managing the city of Evanston and our current pension crisis. So with that being said, from 15 years ago, I fully believe that I agree with the report, and I agree that that's true today as it was then. I also think we can agree that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results is insanity. I think we can agree on that. The council and this committee are the leaders of the city of Evanston. Leadership requires a plan, analysis, and execution. For pension funding, there's two plans. One plan is to follow the actuarial's advice or suggestions, and that could ultimately cost the taxpayer somewhere between $750 million to $1 billion in total costs. Or we could go with the plan where we're funded at 90% at least, up to 100%, and that's going to save approximately $400 to $500 million. Analysis. Analysis on pension funding has been done well over 35 years. The Blue Ribbon Committee was the apex of that analysis. I think everybody here and everybody in the past agrees where we're at. That leads us to execution. I think it's in the Budget and Finance Committee's purview to recommend to the council to fund the pensions at least at 90% every year, if not more. That's going to save the city, as I stated last month, bond rating issues, budgetary issues, and it'd also be more transparent. Tough decisions are part of the job that you guys do every year. I mean, that's just part of what you sign up for. And it costs $50,000 a day in interest is where we're at last year. All right, it was $18 million in interest. It's $50,000. So 5 days would be the annual salary for the city manager. 3 days would be the cost for a police officer. That's interest, not the principal. $50,000 to me seems like a lot of money. I know the city has a lot of money, but we're not getting anything for that $50,000. The taxpayers aren't getting anything. They're paying and they're not getting anything except a delay. You know, last meeting I suggested that we follow the IMRF's model as far as how they are funded and get to that point where the pension actually funds itself with minimum contribution from the taxpayers. My thesis is the city can no longer afford to gaslight funding, all right? The funding issue is not a political issue. The funding issue is mathematics. We're at a point now where we can't just keep doing what the Blue Ribbon Committee said we did 15 years ago. At some point, we have to take a decisive action, and that requires leadership. This is, as I said, this is no longer a political issue. This is a financial issue. So that's what I hope you guys do. I hope you get a suggestion to the council to fund the pensions for next year's budget. Last year's budget was great at 90% or 90% funding. I think that was 100, excuse me, thank you, 100% funded. But I'm thinking 90% at least going forward indefinitely. We're going to go to 100. Thank you for correcting
But
me.
I might add that it was 100% using excess reserves. And
I'm saying that the investment of capital to relieve the $50,000 a day is what we're paying in interest is an incentive to fund it 100%. So
thank you.
that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have, next, any other in-room comments? Okay, online? Okay,
Yes, I have a comment.
sure. Please proceed.
Okay. Wait just a second here. Okay, my name is Darlene Cannon. I'm the second ward. I see that you have the pensions on the agenda. I think that it's a shame what we've been spending on pensions due to accrued interest and fees due to underfunding each year. It's unacceptable that the residents have been forced each year to make up this difference when we could be fiscally responsible and make this a line item as we do with IMRF. We must stop the financial hemorrhaging caused by creating a greater debt balance each year. There are other ways to resolve this issue other than burdening the taxpayers of Evanston any further. Thank you.
Thank you. Other online comments?
Tricia Connolly, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Tricia Connolly, Second Ward. I am asking today, as I've asked before, and several of us have, to ask the committee to please do right by the community. Let's get a handle on the police and fire pension long-term. Again, we totally appreciate what happened this year with, fully funding. Let's etch that in granite. I'm not clear on why we're having conversations about how much we can spend, if we can do it, if we need to check with Foster and Foster. We do this for IMRF, as Darlene said, and it is not in any way reckless to fully fund our pension. It's rather reckless not to do it and put that on our taxpayers and this community in Evanston. So please, let's figure out a way, make a recommendation to City Council, and let's move on and forward with other things that we need to get done in our town. Thank you.
Any other comments? And we will be discussing pensions later. Oh, I'm sorry.
Timothy Schoolmaster. I am the President of the Board of Trustees of the Police Pension Fund. I'm not sure I'm eligible for public comment because I'm an elected official. In Evanston, probably by far the elected official of longest standing. You're a resident expert, so if you have questions, I've talked to Mr. Franken. If you talk to him for the next couple of years, I still have many more years with him, and I think we figured out how it works. And he's got some good ideas for you. I applaud the move that was made last year to move this in a new direction, and there are certainly ways to do it going forward, and many other communities have done it. The 100% funding will help get you somewhere, of course, but many communities, Naperville, they had an extra $5 million, boom, it went into a pension fund. Skokie, 370-some million into their pension funds. They borrowed it. Of course, that train has left the station as far as 2% money. But there are ways, and of course, this will require that all the city assets are disclosed. Our board council has gone on the PPRT. They've gone back to 1976 when that was started, and they are looking at it year by year, and I don't have a report on it yet, but we should see if that the PPRT was at any time directed other than where it was supposed to go. And that could certainly balance out where you want to be on this, if that's available to you. If you have questions, you have my number. You can always get a hold of me, and I'm listening with interest. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, very good. So we can't approve the minutes at this point. Good, so let's go through the first item for discussion. Clayton was going to take us through what I think has been some really great progress on work related to the historical periods of our financial forecasting model and a general fund update, which of course does touch on pensions like everything else does, but we will discuss pensions more directly in a minute.
Thank you, Chair. Let me see if I can bring it up on the screen.
But before you start, just when I first got involved here, one thing that was hard for me to get my mind around was sort of a multi-year view on what actual results have been. And so over the last, certainly Clayton, since you've been here over the last 8 months or so, it's really been good to work with you to try to, pull together. Look, if we have a really good understanding of the last 5 years or so, it is 75% of the way there to get a working model of the next 5 years. So I really commend you on the work that you've done, and I think that it'll really help us resolve pension and other issues in a more thoughtful and long-term strategic way. So thank you very much. We look forward to going through your materials.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so this discussion item we've kind of organized into two parts. The first one, as the chair mentioned, is focused on the general fund past 5 years. And then second, we'll move into a summary of the projected 2022 general fund surplus, which is touched on as part of the forecast. But this page,
There is a summary page, yes, that's in
Summary
the
page.
packet, and I don't know if it'd be possible to send the Excel spreadsheet around to the Finance Committee members, but it's really good because there's additional detail behind each of these line items, like exactly what is other tax and property tax. So we'll figure out how people can understand it more.
so this is the high-level PDF version, and it's on page 6 of the packet. Oh, down there, thank you. Obviously a little, yeah. I'm gonna follow, so the Excel version does, it's easier to blow up and make bigger, but we've got the PDF in the packet with the tiny numbers, but, so we've developed a forecast for the general fund. It looks pretty similar to what you used during the budget season. But we've enhanced it so that you can drill into the individual categories and see some of the individual revenues. It does have future years. We've limited this discussion to just the past 5 years, just because we're continuing to work on. Page 6 of the.
Page 6 of 20.
I'm not.
It's page, I think it is.
Oh, I can unhide 2023. I'm sorry, I'm hiding that column, but
It would be good to get 23 on there, on what you're projecting. That's sort of a key.
There's lots of columns, so I don't want to.
Yeah, you don't wanna expose all- okay.
Everything, but I'll unhide 23, so you can at least see 23
yeah.
as well, sorry.
So it's a work in process, but I think the historical periods are pretty solid. Yeah.
Just as a point of information, if column G 2022 budget, 2022 year to date is, we're at 2023 now, so are we still
So-
close the books in 2022?
Books aren't closed yet, so this is still preliminary information, unaudited. It's audited as part of our audit. But this is where we stand today. This is the numbers as of last week in the general fund. So
Do we not close them until it's audited? Is that how that works?
there's invoices that get paid through March. We may get bills and invoices late. We don't get our sales tax revenues from the state till 3 months later. So like our December sales taxes, we actually get in March. And so after we reconcile in March, that's when we kind of officially close the books on 2022.
Okay, so we put that into the 22, just like the PPRT January payment goes into.
Into 2022.
Okay.
Yep. So again, it has future years functionality, limiting it, as the chair said, just to the past few years, so you can see some historicals here. In terms of revenues, you can see the significant increase in 2021 and 2022. That's right here, over pre-pandemic levels. You can see that's really, in both of those years, we held the property tax levy flat, so there's not new property taxes there. That's driven primarily by inflation, and you can see these were the pre-pandemic revenues, anywhere between about 112 to 117 million. And as you all know, those have surged this year and last year as well to 127 million in 2021 and a projected 140 million in 2022. Drilling into the other taxes category, you can start to see sort of where this is happening. The first couple, these are our major other taxes. The state income tax is a big one. So for many, many years, we trended between 7 and 8 million. You can see those numbers here. And it wasn't until the last couple of years where this has really surged. And this is a shared state revenue. We receive this revenue on a per capita basis. And with recent wage growth, as well as Evanston's population increasing as part of the 2020 census, you can see what that's done to these state income tax returns. In terms of state income tax or state sales taxes, another big one for communities, you generally know from year to year how your sales taxes are going to do. And for Evanston, that number was anywhere between 9.5 million, 9 million, up to about 10.5 million. But you can see the impact of inflation in 2021, 2022. Those have surged quite high, over 12 million. Below that, we get to 5 taxes that are very, very consistent taxes. These are not as tied to activity in the local economy. More consistent, remarkably consistent things like the electricity use tax. You can see each year we trend anywhere between 2.8 million and 2.9 million. And then we get down into these other 2 taxes, which are very much tied to the economy, the real estate transfer tax and PPRT. And you can see that in recent years, those have really surged to really high levels. So those are just a couple of the drivers that we have that are contributing to the surplus that we're seeing this year. We can, the longer version with the, we can absolutely make it available, yeah.
You need the Excel file.
You need the Excel
Yeah,
to be able
but
to drop in
we'll
and see this.
make it
But we
available.
can make it available.
I've seen prior versions of it, just as it was being developed. I did not have the final that he's discussing right now. Yeah, okay.
Other revenues that are surging well, recreation program fees is a big one. You can see the growth in 2022 projecting around 6.7 million. That's higher than we were even before the pandemic. I believe there was a 10% increase to non-resident fees there that have helped contribute to that increase as well. Chair.
Is that because we increased the prices or because participation?
I believe it's probably a combination of both, but I think the thing that the Parks and Recreation Department told us was contributing the most was a 10% increase to non-resident fees for many of our programs that helped cause that. Licenses and permits, building permits doing exceptionally well as in last year as well. And then in terms of GEMT service revenue, another big one, it's a new revenue shared from the state. We get that money for Medicaid transports on our ambulances. So another big new revenue source as well. looking at expenses, on the expense side. So the ARPA money was recorded in the general fund throughout 2022, but per ARPA rules, we've moved all that ARPA money to the ARPA fund as an accounting, kind of an accounting practice. So it was used, and that's where I'm going on the expense side too. Not in the general fund. So this is just focused
So
on the
ARPA's been
general
taken
fund.
out on both the revenue and the expense side?
Correct. So there's no impact of ARPA on this sheet because it's just general fund. Where there is an impact on from ARPA, but there's no, it's a bit confusing. But on salaries and benefits, you can see pre-pandemic, right around 69 to 71 million. And this year, we're at 67 million. Now, it looks like that's a big drop in our salary and benefit costs. But a big portion of that was covered and moved to ARPA as part of the ARPA Rehiring Public Sector Staff project. We were able to pay for 1.7 million in public sector salaries, and those have been moved to the ARPA fund, as well as some vacancies throughout the year too. We recognized that during budget, and we've implemented that vacancy adjustment as well. Our total salaries and benefits cost to the city this year is higher than 67 million, but ARPA subsidized a portion of that that's been moved over to the ARPA fund and recorded there. 1.7 million in salaries.
But, so the 23 total budget, though, is 75 million, right? And you'll probably get into that in a minute, that,
I thought I hid that.
but you
column.
undid
But,
20,
yeah.
23 as well.
So we're obligated, why are we obligated to report ARPA funding separate from the general fund?
Hitesh, do you want to take that one?
And then what I'm getting at here is, right now, today, when we're still talking about ARPA, it's fresh in our minds, but 2 or 3 years down the road, when we're looking at this data and that number comes up, unless it's flagged with an asterisk or something that says, hey, don't forget, it's all ARPA money, it's gonna be misleading.
Right, so here's how the works, and the criteria are different when you're reporting to the Treasury, which Sarah Flex does. And when it comes to the financial side, the annual report and all that, it's a little bit different. So this is how it works. Like suppose one of the year we budgeted, say, ARPA would transfer 8 million to general fund. But at the year end, we looked at it and we had spent only $2 million out of general fund, which were eligible expense under the ARPA. So our revenues, even though it was budgeted and approved by the city council at 8 million, in our books, we could only book $2 million of revenues because we spent only 2 million in eligible expense. And that's how it works with most of our grants. Not transferred, it was approved by the city council. We asked for that, okay, this could be the thing, and we could not spend on eligible projects. We could spend only $2 million. So suddenly the revenue went down to 2 million only because that's only we can book in the revenue because we spent 2 million in eligible expense. And that's how the grants work too, under our accounting rules.
What I'm concerned about, 3 or 4 years down the line, when ARPA isn't fresh in our mind, we're gonna look at that, at the salary and benefit number for 2022, and all we see is that number, we're not getting the full picture.
Right, oh, okay.
That was paid out of a separate fund, which we don't see here, unless we know to look for that fund, that can be potentially misleading in the future.
I mean, the thing which we can do that, we can keep it that 1.7 million, I think, that expense has been moved out of general fund to the ARPA expense. So you get the real idea. Okay, I got your point.
I think if we had a column, where there's a difference because of ARPA by each expense, I think that would be helpful. So if it says, for example, whatever the total salary is there, 79 million, then with ARPA.
I mean, if
it's
you
this.
want,
I
we
think
can do
this-
these
To
things.
Jonathan's point, it's
Salary
very important for
expense as a gross
projections.
number, and then the reduction as a negative number. That
I think
ARPA
just the gross, the amount, say, with ARPA, the total is, because again, I think to Jonathan's point, in order to do projections and look ahead, we need to know that total number.
I know, but then it doesn't match with, so I don't want to put it as a financial with one set of numbers and then you go to the other set of numbers and say, why, I can put either 75 million gross number and say reduction of 1.7 million of ARPA expense, or put a note.
There's a number of ways it could be handled.
Yeah.
What would make the most sense to me off the top of my head is to limit this, to not limit this spreadsheet to just general fund, but include ARPA in it, and put them together. So rather than general fund forecast, we're looking at general fund plus ARPA. All in one place.
So I think, one, we have a tool that is still in development. We can think about what is the best way to give this, make it an informational document that people can use. And we had started now to, just do the general fund. I think we're going to want to look at the other funds too in a similar way, including the enterprise funds, make sure they look like they're fine. And the other key funds, but the point is we're starting to develop this better database that we can all decide how do we annotate it, how do we put notes in it, so that we all understand what the best format is. But also it's good to have it, I think, tied to the budget, because we have a lot of numbers floating around here. We have the budget numbers, which are on modified cash basis. We have the audit numbers, which are on full accrual basis, right? And it just, to me, that's where it becomes very confusing when numbers they're on different bases between different documents. So, but certainly we do need to, in here, understand all the distortions that happened in the 20 to 22 period, caused by ARPA, caused by openings, caused by all sorts of inflation, all sorts of things that led to, fortunately, some sizable surpluses during this 3-year period, which we are very fortunate to have. But I think the real value here, and you can see it here in the 23 column, is that when we get to 23, we have flipped into a deficit of 10 using the current numbers. And again, I think there's some other numbers we want to push on and make sure that all of our revenues are using the most current data and all. But again, I think this is a big part of this committee, is to get this form, get this file into a way that is workable for everyone, and we can all talk about the real numbers. And have a go-to document.
So in the context of this being a working process, like, we're making really good progress here. One way or the other, we'll have to make sure that
we will see
we're.
what we can come up with. I mean, we got your point that yes, we want the real number, and at the same time, how much we are kind of subsidizing from ARPA.
Yeah.
So we'll come up with it.
Can we get that soon? I think just for transparency, we need to know what our total expenses were. Also,
What we're sharing here is the process, right?
And it is the general fund. I mean, it should agree with what the general fund had. It's just, there are the distortions of ARPA during this 3-year period, that how do we reflect those, either on another sheet that looks the same, or whatever it might be.
I think it's a separate column that's at the end. But and can you tell us, back to the page with the different taxes, which we're looking at on a accrual versus modified cash, so we know, like, which ones are we waiting before we can get our year to date on 22?
I think it's
These
probably,
are all on accrual basis. So it's,
All of them are.
Yeah, so if some income comes a month later, we book it to the entries for December.
All of these taxes?
Yeah, so all of this would be on accrual. The only thing which is more on the cash basis is the parking fines and all, as we get it,
But this is on the same basis as the budget is prepared, correct?
I mean, no. I mean,
No.
budget is prepared. It's like we have an enterprise fund, right?
Yeah.
So when we book the enterprise funds in our audit report, they are like a business. They are on full accrual.
Yeah.
Even we book it. But in government, and this is a good kind of question with one of my council member who is not here, like when we issue the debt for TIF funds, it's nowhere on the TIF financials. So, I mean, when I tell the council member that, okay, you can't spend because we have only 300,000 fund balance and 600,000 outstanding debt, and then the person asks me that, okay, I don't see in your 600,000 anywhere on the books, but it's called governmental fund, so we don't report that under fund level. It is kind of compiled as what we call a general long-term debt, which is like a schedule in our audit report. So, and we issued like a debt for West Evanston TIF. It was the case, and now we are paid off.
But when you prepared the budget for 23 in November, December, we had a projected surplus for 22 that was, we don't have it on here, but as I recall, what was the number? It was in the high teens, I think, was what the.
15.
It was
14 or 15,
14.1.
right?
It was
14.1.
14.1.
And so now we're saying it's $10 million higher, and I think Clayton was going to take us through some of those
Right.
major differences, primarily on the revenue side.
Right.
But this is the same basis as that comparison to the $15 million surplus would have been?
Yes.
So Claire, that is apples to apples, is clearly with the higher revenues, some of which were only apparent in, coming in as we're doing the audit, and we can look for ways to get better visibility going forward so that they could be in the projection, right? But the fact is, the surplus, fortunately, increased for 22 versus what was anticipated at the time that the
In
23
October,
budget,
November,
yes, was pulled together.
And we will go through that in the next slide, I think, and then the
Okay.
potential use of the fund balance.
And maybe we should just move on to that. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. This is a work in process. We'll distribute it to people. But I think that's sort of my big takeaways here are 2019, we were kind of flat. 2023, we're currently showing a negative 10. We had these big surpluses primarily in 21 and 22, and we need to understand that and also really be certain that, how do we do a reforecast of 23 to really say, are we dealing with 10 or are we dealing with something different? Because that really will inform what our, how we think about pension, funding, how we think about other factors going forward. Because hopefully we're not truly going to use 10 million of budget surplus in 23.
Yeah, if we're good to move, you want to move on to the surplus discussion?
Why don't we go
then?
to surplus discussion?
So this was included in your packet. So this highlights the difference between our October 2022 projection of $14.1 million surplus versus our current, where we stand today at 24.4. So really driven by 8 key revenues. I already touched on those as I went through them in the forecast. But this shows our projection from October versus where we stand today. So you can see sales taxes, they stayed strong with inflation. They surged to levels higher than we anticipated at the time. Real estate transfer tax, the real estate market stayed strong in the later months of the year. PPRT, a big one. We got 40% of our total revenue for last year in the months of December and January for PPRT. So when we ran the projection in October, we only had 60% of where we finished at year end.
Though those deposits, I just want to say, for PPRT, in early December, those were made. So there was only one more payment, and that was January of the PPRT. So we had all of that as of by the time we were voting on our budget, except for the January payment of about $750,000.
Parking taxes, so this is almost back at pre-pandemic levels. Parking activity during the winter months, probably a revenue that we can put back to where it was at before pandemic levels. Recreation program fees, again, finished quite a bit higher. Strong winter programming, finished about $1 million higher than anticipated. Building permits, again, higher than anticipated activity, and then GEMT as well. Of these 8, 6 of them are all-time highs for the city. Everything except real estate transfer tax, where we had our all-time high in 2021, and parking taxes, where we've had some other all-time highs. All these other ones, just unprecedented levels, really driven and powered by inflation. So needless to say, a very good year, contributing to this $24 million surplus versus the $14 million surplus that we shared when we presented the budget in October.
So I just want to say, I think some of this surplus was available to us. I know that. And I think, as City Manager Stowe knows, initially it was $7 million is what you said. And I said, I really think we have more. And thank you, City Manager Stowe, for going back and working with the finance team to then say 14. So that's a big, but even that, I know the year prior to that, it was almost 30 million. And it's just so important when we're trying to establish our budget for the subsequent year, that as much of that as possible is made available to council with full transparency so that we can appropriately assess the levy. So I just ask that going forward, I mean, I can see the deposits from, for the PPRT, which I followed closely, the days those were made. So I think that some of these numbers, we could have been a little bit closer to that by the time we were actually deciding on what to levy. So I just ask that this year, please, that we do everything possible to really bring that as close to where we really stand in surplus, so that we're taxing appropriately our residents. Thank you.
And I think that's one of the really critical outputs of this process is going to be better forecasting. Absolutely. Completely agree that some of the growth in 10, maybe if we had better tools, we would have been closer to the actual. But also, I know many communities struggle with things like PPRT as to what they are. So I think identifying where we had the big misses will inform us where we need to look harder to get a better forecast, right?
Understand.
And just one point, the surplus on the sheet, and this is another good reason to have the sheet, is the surplus in 21 was 13. The total ended excess was or total surplus was 30. But the year added 14. The surplus for the year was 14. But the actual fund position was 31.
So then looking at ways in which City Council, this committee can consider using this surplus, staff would put forward a handful of recommendations. The first one has already been approved as part of the budget. That was 10.1 million. As the chair mentioned, potentially need to take a close look at that and make sure that is indeed the number, but that is what was needed in order to balance the 2023 general fund budget. 4.5 million of that was for the additional transfer to pensions. 3 million of that was reallocation of the real estate transfer tax to the reparations fund, and the rest was what was needed to balance the general fund. Number 2 is covering the overage in the animal shelter project that was voted on by City Council last week or 2 weeks ago. It was 1.5 million over the budget, and the approval of that item said that would come from the general fund reserve. Number 3 is higher than budgeted wage increases for union contracts. Only one of the city's 3 contracts have been agreed to so far. That's the police contract. We think that's. Fire is done too, right? Mental fire and excuse me, fire's done too. So we're working with fire to understand what that financial impact will be for 2023, and then AFSCME as well. So this is still a to be determined, but as these agreements are approved by City Council, these numbers become approved as sort of a use of fund balance in order to pay for those increases.
Just for the record, fire is almost done. We haven't yet. Negotiations are done. They have not been approved by council.
Got it. Thank you. And these other items are potential items. So one is to reduce or delay the GO bonds for CIP projects. We have an agenda item next on the agenda where we can go into greater detail on what that may look like, but there's the potential to use that in order to reduce the amount that we need to go out and issue GO bonds for. Next is incremental public safety pension increases. So we know that the wage increases for police and fire may have some impact, as well as the market returns on the amount of contributions we need to make to the public safety pension funds in order to be on track, and we'll wait for, there's another item on the agenda later to discuss that as well. So I'll let that be discussed then. Next is a transfer to the insurance fund per fund balance policy. So the city's fund balance policy says that the city should transfer any reserves over 20% of the general fund, and I have that on the next slide. This is all in our budget document. These are our fund balance policies. It says that anything over 20% should be reappropriated to other funds that have not met their reserve requirements. Once all funds have met their reserve requirements, anything over that should go to the capital improvement program. So one such fund that has a pretty significant deficit is the insurance fund. It's recognized by our auditors each year in the annual financial report as running a deficit. And so that's one fund that could use the additional excess reserves, plus anything over that would go to CIP. And then lastly, we discussed this during budget, but reconsider increasing the general fund balance policy to 20%. We discussed that then, but it's now is a great time to do it since there are these available reserves. We're in a position to be able to do it if the city council so desires. With that kind of covers the general fund discussion. So happy to discuss.
So relative to
else.
23, so if you just go back to that, the schedule that's got multiple years, it does, have you re-looked at the revenue projections for 23, particularly in other taxes? Because it does appear that we budgeted, relative to what we've seen today, we're about a $14 million decline in other taxes between 22 actual and 23. And I think, I assume we're in the process of re-looking to make sure, you've looked at what's going on the expense side, but do we think that there's potential for revisions that need to be made on the revenue side as well.
Okay, so I would bring up a couple of things, and it's a good point that, okay, let's see, we better do a projection forecasting. Now, it's always been a mixed message when I get these emails or I read these financial things, from banks, the other organizations who keep an eye from the economists in inflation. And late October, November, when we were doing the budget and there were news that, budget would go down, the inflation would go down to a normal 2.5%, 3% by the mid-year, mid-23. And when we talked to our finance directors, peers, and all that, and there was a concern based on all these reports. Now, even today, I get this email after 2 bank failure that this could be a beginning of 2008-9. Now, I know everyone has their opinion, but this is not a personal individual. I read whether it's in Wall Street, from Morgan Stanley, the reports comes from the banking, their economy, their economies, that. So sometimes it is tough for me to okay, I can just say, okay, I'll go ahead and increase all those revenues to kind of somewhat match 22 revenue. Now, one good thing is about the PPRT, and I think Chair Livingston, you already kind of mentioned that. Where is that thing? I would just show you, look at this PPRT. Now, we get these numbers on IML, Illinois Municipal League, and we kind of budget based on that. Now, you would see the numbers if you look at the last line, PPRT millions. It's a wide swing when they were kind of projected. First year, first column, 24 millions overall. This is as a state, Then you would see it jumped 32.95, and then it jumped to 46.50 in 2 months. They said, no, we'll get a lot more now. And yeah, there's a lot of almost 8-page report in that February IML review article. So you can see that. So it's a wild swing. Now look at the last column. They say in 23, you would get 28% less compared to fiscal year 22, the calendar year 22. So, and again, yes, my duty as a CFO to bring up these things, what we hear, what we read, and yes, ultimately it is this committee and the city council which directs us that, okay, let's do this.
So may I just comment on this?
Sure.
So I'm really glad to see you're bringing up this chart. I found this very useful because in the past we haven't referred to this chart when in fact you were way under budgeting what we should have. So when you see from 21 to 22, it's almost double. It is more than double they projected, but in fact, ours stayed the same. We didn't double our projections or even get anywhere near that. So yes, but we have been under budgeting considerably. So I absolutely, and this is what I pointed out during the budget season. I said it was going to be about a 30% decrease, and I was corrected, and people said it was 13, but this is what I was referring to, this amount. So I think it's important to look at this, and I'm really glad that you are bringing this up now. But I would say you have to also look at this in terms of what we have been budgeting and where we're at now. So in terms of that 28% decrease, I think what you budgeted for this year is getting a lot closer. According to what we brought in last year, what you budgeted for this year is much more appropriate and reflects this more closely.
And I agree. And the one thing which, and I think I remember during the budget discussion, I think it was Councilmember Newsma who asked me the question about that, how we come up with. What has happened even in the past, the timing of the IML report. Like you see the wild swing that where they went up by 25%. If I am budgeted the numbers in November and suddenly they come out with a new number in January, and we have already passed the budget, so city council has. And it could have gone up 20% or gone down, but I think at least we have passed the budget in that sense. So we missed the deadline to fix that unless we do the budget amendment. And generally, if it's the expenses are over, we are required to do the budget amendment, so we do that. But yeah, I just want to, and you have a very good point, Councilman Kelly, that look at the wild swings, and I would present these kind of things to this committee and the council in the future, and yes, I would seek your direction that, okay, what do you think? So that is one of the other things, the sales tax and all that thing, subject to inflation.
Can you tell us really quick while we're on PPRT, so last year what was budgeted? The total, not the two separate, I know you have two separate accounts for pensions, and what did we actually budget for 22 and what did we budget for this year? I guess what did we budget and what was our total for last year?
The budget that was passed in 2021 had a budget for PPRT of 1.2 million.
Okay, and then what did we end up with in 2022? I know all those numbers are in now.
5.5 million.
So we budget, so I just want that, everyone to note that, 1.2 million, but we actually ended up with 5.2. So that's significant. So when we see that drop of 28%, that is significant, but you have to keep in mind how much we had been under budgeting. Thank you. And then so for this year, this year we budgeted how much for 23?
23 budget is PPRD 2.2?
Well, plus the 600,000 for the pension PPRT,
Oh, yeah,
so.
roughly $3 million.
So 2.8 million is, 2.8 is what we budgeted this year.
Right.
We ended up with 5.2 last year, so if you reduce that by 30%, I think we're much closer, now for the first time in a long time, we're much closer to where we should be. Thank you.
Again, the second thing is on the kind of pretty much same line, the real estate transfer tax. You see the trend. We have received as low as 2.6 and as high as 6.2. So like almost $3.6 million difference between the highest number and the lowest. So I just want to bring it up. Yes,
Yeah,
ultimately you can have the kind of some kind of direction as what do you feel about it, you know, and we can kind of when we get into the October, November.
So I know it's difficult to forecast in an environment like this. No one's saying it's not. I think it would be very helpful for you and team to go back and say, look, where did we have revenue variances over whatever number you want to pick, $1 million?
Right.
Okay, there are lines and lines of revenue that do not matter, right? They do not matter. There must be 10 that are really driving the huge variance, and let's try to understand as best we can what drove that variance. And with that understanding, I think we could relook at some of the 23 numbers, recognizing there could be risk, right? But we're not budgeting for a depression in the back half of the year, right? We don't want to be we want to be middle of the road, right? We want to be middle of the road and between conservative and aggressive on what these revenues are. And it does, I would really want to understand how are the components of these other taxes going from 70 to 56. It just seems like a big decline, right? And so maybe we can talk about that next meeting in terms of what were the major drivers of the overall revenue change, and how do we use all the information we can to just be better about that going forward? And I would say build that into a revised budget as well. Don't just do the revised budget where we know we need to on the expense side. Let's not, if we're really not walking around with a deficit of 10, let's really understand where we are, right? Maybe we're at 5. Right? Or maybe we're at 12, right? But all this information should be constantly updated to be the best current view. And we roll that into a 5-year forecast going forward so we really know where we're going. Because, this financial planning is not just the current year budget or forecast. It's always what's going on over a 5-year period.
And I agree with you. I mean, it's not static. The numbers would change. One of the big thing on the expense side is our contracts. So as with that, we will have some idea, okay, what kind of impact we have on the expense side. By that time, we would have few months of actual revenue, particularly the big ones, sales tax, income tax, home rule tax, because it's always 3 months. So you are absolutely right. We will continue to update the numbers, even ask for the say, okay, we think that projected revenues could be this and expense could be this, So are we at 10 million? Or as you said, is it 5 or 15, and we will continue to kind of update the numbers.
Okay, can I just ask, it's Sherry, just 2 quick questions. The surplus in 2021, was that all used up?
That we used it for, it was, the 2021 surplus is included in these year-to-date numbers for 2022. And so there were a lot of things throughout 2022 that we approved to use surplus in order to pay for. At the end of the year, it looks like because expenses came in a bit under budget, we didn't necessarily have to use that surplus to pay for those things. And so that's taken into consideration in the estimates here.
In the 24?
I think the way it works on the schedule is it just the surplus of 4 gets added to the beginning surplus of 18.7 to get you to 31.4 at the end of 21.
And then you mentioned the 5 million because we have a deficit in the insurance fund. Just trying to weigh that versus the pension. Do we pay interest when we have the deficit, or what does it cost us to have a deficit in the insurance fund?
No, I mean, it is the city's internal service fund. That means it is funded by the general fund. So basically, yeah, I mean, it is right now subsidized by general fund. I mean, technically, we can't carry the negative balance, but it is a negative balance offset by the general fund positive balance. But there is no interest cost or any other cost to the city.
I think there's
Thank you.
sorry, I just want to comment also on the point made about, that we had this large surplus from 21 that carried over, and that we spent some of it, and then to your point, David, that carried over then to this year. I think that's accurate. But I think we just need to be apprised more during council when we are spending beyond the budgeted amount and dipping into the surplus. And I think that hasn't always happened in the past, so that we are, voting informed that we are spending from surplus. I think that's really important. So I just ask going forward that any time an expenditure is brought forward, I think it's getting better. So, but that any time we're asked to pass an expenditure at council, that it's made really clear, like we're taking this from the budget. I think Ms. Biggs did a nice job of that the other night when talking about the animal shelter, mentioning that there is this, at $25 million in surplus, to bring that up as we vote. So I just ask that we really stick to that we're always really clear about that with council as we vote on expenditures.
Our
Thank you.
memos when a memo comes to us asking us to approve an expense, it does say what fund it's coming out of and how much is in that fund and where we're at in that fund. So I think that information is already there. We just need to have visibility to it.
Right.
Just one more, I wanted to answer your point too about revenues. If you take a look at the January monthly report that we just did, we do look forward. I know that's a focus area of this committee to do better monthly reporting. We did add a section in there for our major general fund revenues on a monthly basis and provide some more visibility into those. So you can see a month-to-month snapshot of where each of those major revenues stand monthly. So that was a nice add. And it should help us inform, there's a column in here for 2023 projections, and we fully plan on using it throughout the year to help when we get to budget have better numbers. So
again, I think this is great work. There's lots of questions that get raised as a result of it, and that's all good, right? That's all good, because it wasn't as clear to me before how the years lined up, and it's much clearer now, which raises great questions like, look how volatile this is, or why did we under budget this? It just, if you don't have the format, it's hard to ask the question. So I think it's really excellent work.
sounds good.
And you'll send us that breakdown of the taxes?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd love to get a copy of the Excel so I can do my own Excel mojo on it.
Now, Chair, we have this reimbursement resolution. I know we needed the action. We don't have the quorum, but at least I just wanted to bring up, and Lara can add something.
Yep.
At least council members would be there in the next council meeting. We need the action, because if we don't take the action, we keep on losing. And obviously, the council approved the projects in 22, and we did not issue the bonds.
Right, well, we can't take action though today.
No, not today, but I think at least can we kind of expect the council to take action on the next
It was
meeting?
referred to finance and budget, so we can't until finance and budget takes action.
Okay, my point is this: if this item has been held for a long time, like say months and months, at some point I will run out of my CIP cash, and so either I will have to use my general fund cash or draw upon the line of credit. Now, I hate to use it, like as of now, today, the line of credit rate is 5.8. And I hate to use it, I would rely on my general fund. But yes, even we have $8 million IDOT bills outstanding. So it has reduced the fund balance because the work is done. But the cash is still with us, so we will draw upon that. But certainly, as she works on 22 projects, 23 projects, which are approved by the city, bids out, and,
Right.
moves forward.
I think you have to
We'll have
dip-
to kind of seriously consider this thing,
Procedural question, though. This item, Resolution 19R23, is in front of us. Does that resolution require approval by Finance and Budget before it goes to council?
I would leave it to, but I think that it came to APW because of this, every year it comes to the APW, and then APW says, let's refer it to the Finance and Budget. before it comes back to the council.
I would propose that we schedule another meeting soon, not wait till our next one just to discuss this, so that we can get a move on, so that you have an answer. I would propose, Chair Livingston, that we schedule either next week or the following week an additional special finance and budget meeting to address this.
That's fine, because you're saying the alternative is we borrow at 5.8% when we don't need to.
No, if we run out of it, even if you today ask me how much money I have in CIP, I might have $8-9 million.
Right, does that need to be an in-person meeting, or could we make it a telephonic meeting, do you know?
I mean,
It would have
I
to
would
be,
have to
we'll
We'll
rely
figure out
on
the best
it would have to be
format.
in person, but I'm questioning, do we need to have another meeting? Does this count, does this committee have to approve that before it moves? For discussion, right?
No, for discussion and action, I think. So action was that you would recommend to the city
If
council.
the answer is yes, it has to be voted on by this committee, then we have to bring it back.
And again, my point is this, I just bring it up that, okay, if it doesn't happen next month, but again, yeah, if it drags on for some reasons, as she works on the projects, as we pay the bills, and yeah, we will run out of the, kind of cash at some point.
I would propose that we schedule, if it's, I question the urgency of needing to issue that, but separate from that, if there is the urgency, let's just schedule a special finance and budget meeting just for that item.
What do you think, Lara? Do we need a meeting, or I think, if we don't expect the IDOT bill in next month, we are fine, yes. It's almost
Right, I would
$7
say
million.
use the surplus for now, and then otherwise we schedule a meeting next week.
I think one of the concerns that Hitesh has raised is that if we make a payment that we said was going to be general obligation bonds, but we have not passed this resolution, we only have 60 days to pass the resolution after a payment is made. And at that point, if we exceed the 60 days, the money cannot be paid by the general obligation bonds. Now, currently, we have approved $293,000 of 2023 general obligation bonds. And at the next meeting, March 27th, there's another $3.5 million that are proposed to be approved. So does it need to be done today? No, but each month that the committee meets and doesn't approve it is going to start running into a situation where the funds just won't be able to be done by bonds. They'll probably end up coming out of the general fund cash balance instead. So there's a risk. The actual penalty may not be something that is tremendously concerning, but at some point, there's $14 million roughly in 2023 general obligation bonds that are included in the adopted budget. So at some point, it will be a decision of
Sure.
how to manage that.
But I want to point out also, we did have, it was an additional almost $10 million that was not disclosed, that we weren't aware of when we passed the budget. So we do have $10 million, I'm just saying, that was not, we knew we had a 14 point something, now we have a $24 million surplus. So I think we can pass this, but I think we also have some funds right now currently available.
I'm just not convinced we need to take a vote at this committee. This could go back to AMPW, we approve it at that committee, and then it goes to council.
So
So
APW
I
voted
guess what
for
I'm
it.
advocating for is, rather than postponing this, let's just discuss it now. We don't have a quorum, but it doesn't require a vote, in my opinion. Let's have the discussion now, and then it can go back.
Jonathan, I think that would be, undermining the process. It was voted on in APW to refer this for action to finance and budget. It's on our agenda as an action item. That's why I'm proposing that we just schedule a special meeting for this. Otherwise, we would be undermining the process.
I mean, we'll reach out to Nick, right, legal.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
no. We can't meet virtually. That was the direction we got from the IML's legal department about.
I'm happy to get together, but if we are confident we'll have a quorum to
Right,
discuss it.
so I'm just,
Right, so we can get together for a 15-minute meeting to go over it. If you want to. Yeah.
How many people do we need for a quorum? Because I will be in town next week in Chicago,
I
so.
don't think we should, that'll going back and forth right now. I think we'll send out a
We
doodle
need
calendar.
5 people in the room.
Okay, so maybe we could do it next Tuesday.
Yeah, if we did it next Tuesday, I'll be here, and there's 4 of you there.
I could do it then.
I can do it then, too. Claire, are you free?
And I'll be in town, so.
Ms. Biggs, are you in town?
Yes.
And maybe Leslie will be back, and
All right, we'll try to do it next Tuesday, but we'll formalize that, okay? Sorry we had you come here
That's okay.
tonight. We'll try to do it at 5 and make it fast.
Okay.
Right.
21st.
All right, so I think the next item, okay, the next item is the pension discussion, and let me just start this. I think we have unanimous view that we want to be funding on a path to 100%. I don't think there's any, seems like at times people think that that's not what we have consensus, if not, unanimous view on. What we are trying to get to, though, before we do that, is an update from Foster and Foster and a projection by year as we go from a path of where we actually started this year to 100%, what is our best view on what those contributions are by year? And there have been some very material events that happened relative to any prior estimates that we were given. Number one would be, and it looks like we lost our pension people here, but the police and fire returns were down about 15.5% last year. I assume police was down 15.5%. Fire would have been down similar. That's versus an assumed rate of return of 6.5%. So you're actually off 21% from where you thought your asset levels would be. So that's a big difference on $300 million worth of asset levels. Police $60 million. There, and then also we have the impact of the new police and fire contracts, which mathematically will just increase the liability because I believe that those increases are higher than the rate of compensation increases that was included in the prior study. So we've asked Foster and Foster, as we talked about last time, to take all the best current information, and if the number was 25 million last year, what is it now? And if it's 25 million now, I would say that would be great news. Given those things we just talked about, it seems like it could only go up from there, but let's get the real data and let's see, is it stable? Is it not stable? And then we can work into our model here, what is the right mix of revenues to support that between property tax levy, between PPRT, between excess reserves to the degree we have them. How comfortable are we in building in here how we're going to fund what the actuarially determined recommended contributions are on that funding path? And Hitesh, when are we scheduled to get that information, the first view on the information back from Jason? I think it was within the next month or so.
Right, so we have received, we get the data, actual data from the Lauderbeck and Lauderbeck, who works for the pension, so we have provided the pension fund data for police, and I think we are expecting fire data this Friday. So once we get it, we will share with the Foster and Foster. I don't know the exact turnaround time from his side, Jason's,
Yeah, so it's at least a few weeks, but I think we're getting closer, and I know there's some, debate on this point, but I think we all see it the same way. Let's just get the current information and develop what the funding plan is, right? And
Yeah,
build it
the
into
funding
this
plan, I
model.
think we have to do that ASAP so that staff knows how they're allocating funds. And I think I hope we can all agree that we want the full PPRT to go towards our pensions. So it'll be probably coming higher, which I'm fine with that, than the 2.8 that you budgeted for If you reduce it by about 30%, what we came in with, it would be closer to 3.5. So we'll probably end up with at least 3 million. I would hope there would be no resistance to directing staff to those funds are intended for pension and for debt. So they haven't always been used that way. We put it towards Parks and Rec and other things over the years, not all of it, but portions of it. It's been divided up. But I hope that we could at least let staff know right now that we expect the full PPRT to go towards pensions. That's the least I think we could direct staff right now to understand that, I think, so that it's not spent on anything else, I think. Well, we can't officially do anything, but I would like it to consider. Anyway, I would just ask that you consider the full PPRT as a payment to consider. I understand we can't vote on anything, along with the continued 90% levy, and then there will be, and I did get those numbers from Jason at some point, and I think it is going to come in a little bit higher based on the actuarial mortality, everything, all the different numbers that come in. It will come in higher this year. But of course, we want to continue to reduce that incredible obligation right now that sits on our residents' shoulders, which is, just over $250 million. Let's continue. We did it last year for the first time. That was historic. Let's continue on that. That path, that to continue reducing it means funding at 100%. Now, you can have a path where you continue to leverage debt on our residents, and then all of a sudden we go down the path. Now we have a mountain during those last 5 years to climb because we chose not to fund at 100%. So I want to do, carry on in a responsible path for the future of this city, not just right now so we free up funds. So I just hope we can.
What I hear is Councilmember Kelly agreeing with what Chair Livingston just said.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone is against funding on 100% and understanding what the real path is. And one point, Councilmember Kelly, that I want to explore that I've heard you say, and I want to make sure I understand what you mean, is that 90% of the pension contribution should come from a pension levy? Is that right?
I would like to propose that we look at, not tonight obviously because we can't officially do it, but look at, that's what we've pretty much been levying for a good number of years now, 90%, that we continue to do that for the next, make a plan for 3 years so that we can assess it. And I would say levying at 90% as we've been doing, directing the full PPRT payment towards that difference. And then, as you mentioned, looking at our excess reserve funds above and beyond, like surplus, to make up that difference if necessary. So I think like this year, given that the PPRT is dipping a little bit, it'll probably come in at around 3. We will have to then, there'll be some amount that we'll probably have to take from surplus. And it will be increased. I think I did get that number. I think it's about 1.5, maybe more, I think this year.
So last budget season, there was a debate or a desire to not raise property taxes at all, to keep them flat at the overall $55 million that they've been at for about 3 years. Are you saying that if we have numbers that we all agree with and it's 90% of a higher number, because 25 million, 90% of 25 million, whatever it is higher than what our property tax levy was last year. I think it's higher by about $2.5 million. So would we be looking for, relative to the entire 55 million, would we be comfortable in having the $55 million number go up by the amount that we need to fund 90% of the pension contribution?
Yep. So I would say yes, that 90% would go up. Well, that's what we've been at 90%. So if that means it goes up, because it will go up somewhat this year, what I will not do is make it a political football out of it. We don't say, should we raise taxes to pay IMRF? So I will refuse to talk about doing that with regard to our public safety staff. We don't do that either for them. So what we do is we levy at 90, we apply the full the full PPRT, we make up the difference with surplus. Now, if we raise taxes, we might be raising them, to fund a really, really nice animal shelter. It's all fungible, right? So I would prefer not to make a political football out of the pensions of our public safety staff, the same way we don't do that with IMRF.
I understand. I'm just trying to make sure I understand that. And I think that's why we want to get the projections and we say, what does this imply about property taxes?
Councilmember Kelly, I think what you're suggesting is it may very well in the end be where we end up. But I think you're arriving at a conclusion when we haven't yet done all our homework. Right? So you're,
I think
you're,
it was
you're
Chair
suggesting a number of 90%.
Livingston that
What
suggested
I'd
what
like
I
to
raised
do,
the
hey,
tax.
excuse me, please. I would like to get the information from the consultant, and once we have that, we know we want to climb the mountain. We don't have a map, and we don't know where we are. Once we go through this process, we will know both of those things, and we can plot a course. And that course may very well be, let's fund 90% of our obligation through property taxes and the other 10% from PPRT. It may be something else. We don't know because we don't have enough data to make that informed conclusion at this point. So you're jumping to a conclusion that we may get to eventually, but it might be different, so I don't want to overcommit ourselves at this point.
Sure, but I just want to say, I do think it's our obligation as a Finance and Budget Committee to give staff that direction sooner than later. They have to budget, they have to, I feel like it's already late, and I'm disappointed in this committee that we aren't already giving that direction. There's nothing wrong with giving that direction now. That is not going to cause to say that we levied 90% last year, the year before, that we do that again. But this year, one of the differences is we're giving direction as soon as possible to say, hey, that PPRT, which is going to be around $3 million, maybe more, will go fully towards the pension. Like that we could do, and I feel like I'm a little bit concerned that we keep kicking this can down the road as the year progresses. We need to give direction sooner than later if we're going to actually have some sort of impact on our budget. And I think that's really important that we do that ASAP, just like hopefully, in the summer around June, we will already get some proposals so that we can effectively weigh in and make sure that our budget procedures go more smoothly and appropriately. So I don't think we should wait too much longer, Chair Livingston, to give that direction for this year. And I would propose that we do it for 1, 2, or 3 years so that we can assess it, but not just 1 year. I would like to see us make a proposal for 3 years, then we can assess after 3 years and see if that was the appropriate way to, or 2 years if we feel more comfortable.
And it will be a key input into this 5-year model that Clayton is building for the forecast periods. So, and I think we're all in agreement. We're just trying to understand more what is the suggested contribution, so then we can say, with better revenue projections, what seems to make sense. And it's not going to take months and months to do that. This should be something that hardly has to get discussed in the budget process next year, because we will have made the decision.
Exactly, that would be great. And I think I did get that number, and I think it is somewhere between 1 and 2 million more this year. So I thought you would have had that too. But Mr. Black, I know you provided fire with a number of 11.793 million, I think, for 23, the projected contribution. I'm just wondering what percent that, I think
11.79 million for fire.
Right.
That-
For 23, is that right?
And that's the contribution we made to fire. So our approach in 23, as approved by council for both police and fire, was funding 90% with the property tax levy,
Right.
plus the 605 in PPRT. So it probably is about 89%, 88,
Right.
89% through the
Oh.
property tax levy, with the additional 10% covered through excess general fund reserves.
Okay, thank you. So that was for 22. And I just have a question on payments. When we, when we do actually make those contributions, those are generally made, so like for 22, those are made, or 23, around, it can go into like February, March, right? Before we finalize those.
Our transfers to the pension fund. So historically, we've only made those transfers, I believe, twice a year, aligning with Cook County's, the pension PPRT. Those small amounts, we front load, we make sure the pension funds get their PPRT at the beginning of the year. But the transfer of the pension funds happen after we receive that revenue from Cook County. This year was different because we added on the additional excess reserves, and we've made those transfers, I believe, Hitesh, right? We've transferred the additional excess reserves already to the pension funds that were approved as part of the budget.
I think they've all been made now, right?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was our pension discussion, ongoing. So the TIF surplus referral, I guess we can't act on that either. Is that something we should, I guess, just for discussion? So I guess we're just discussing it. Okay.
I mean, this was a referral, I think, by the council member Reed. And we kind of included that. Obviously, when you look at the monthly financials, our audit reports and all that, you would see those numbers there. But we just put out the numbers to have a kind of in the referral, it says, yeah, provide the 5-year data for this one. So we have provided 22 are the unaudited numbers, pretty close to what would we end up might. But again, yeah, it's unaudited. But yeah, the numbers are there for Howard Ridge, West Evanston, Dempster Dodge, Chicago, Main TIF, and then the new one, which is, yeah, 550, you know. I mean, 550 is the new, the two TIFs which are supposed to expire, the kind of West Evanston and Howard Ridge in the next 5 to 6 years, 27 and 28.
27 for West Evanston.
Yeah, I think I can check exactly, but yeah, 27 and 28. So those are Dempster Dodge and Chicago, Maine. Obviously, that came on the board, I think, just 5, 6 years ago. So we have plenty of time left there.
And where do the excess funds go if they're not expended?
I mean, they are, that's why we included, like, if you see the pattern, I mean, obviously, when I talked to Lara, Dave Stonebeck about the public works projects, you know, sidewalks, streets, curbs, water, sewer projects, I mean, they have plenty of, yeah. If they say that if you have a excess funds, we can use it. And so that way, you know, it would kind of take away the burden on the water sewer fund or the CIP fund. So we have to issue the less debt. So we try to. So if you look at some of those things, you would see substantial expenses, you know. But sometimes it's timing that depending on that timing, 1 year could be a lot more expense, second year could be a little less. But that's why, yeah, we put out the revenue expense, the operating surplus, whether it's a deficit or the positive number, and then the final fund balance. But yes, I mean, again, I do this exercise every year throughout the year, talk to the Public Works, Lara, Dave, and all that. And I mean, they would gladly take the money and use it for the kind of best use in the TIF area.
The revenue seems to be pretty variable, which strikes me as
I mean,
more variable than I would have expected.
Right. So you would see that Howard Ridge, West Evanston suddenly jumped in 1 year after this new assessment. I think that happened with this new assessor 3 years back. So you would see, yeah, substantially, like look at the 2020. No, not that one. Yeah, that could be the bond. The fiscal 18 you are seeing, Councilmember Newsma, but I'm still talking about the numbers if you compare to like fiscal 19 and 20. Like say Howard Ridge went up from 768 to 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Or West Evanston went from 733 to 1.7.
Yeah, but the 2018 for the 4.1.
That's the bond revenue. We issued the bonds.
Okay.
For two trips, I think. So the same thing happened in one of the other funds. Yeah.
Got it. So
But yeah, I mean, we have put entire thing as a revenue.
So we would expect to see every 3 years a jump up, and it's still going to be variable.
Not necessarily. I got the latest numbers 2 months back for 2021. The TIF has lost almost 9 million in EAV. Again, hopefully it comes back in 22 numbers when it comes out later this year. But yeah, it's now one thing we have to remember, it's a good thing when we have better numbers in TIF. The bad thing is it takes away your EAV from the tax section because now it's dedicated only for that area.
So the Dempster Dodge TIF in 2017, 2.1 million, that was a bond
Includes the
there.
bond money.
Okay, got it.
I mean, only 150 or 40,000 was a incremental, but the others is a bond.
That's usually just a conditional bond, right? The bond money for the TIF is usually just.
What's that?
The outset, right? The bond money is only usually reflected in the first, when it starts.
Right. I mean, that's, compared to the enterprise.
Good, well,
fund.
maybe not the Howard Ridge TIF. In 2018, there was a, whatever, $3.5 million bond or so, and
Right.
that was in,
Okay, this second.
right, and
No,
that
but
was
this is
well
the-
into the life of the TIF.
But this is a good example, what I talked about. This is called the governmental funds, all those TIF funds.
Yeah.
So you see it as a revenue, right? But the next year, outstanding debt is nowhere on the fund financials.
Yeah.
So it would be nice to know when this goes up because of versus taxes.
I mean, we can put the two lines, yeah, bond proceeds and the tax revenue incremental.
Yeah,
So-
that would be great if we
Yeah.
could get that, so, because I think that's really significant, so we can see how well a TIF is actually doing, because a bond doesn't really tell us, but the tax increment does.
But at
So if we
least
could
you
have
would
that
get,
separated out.
I mean, Councilmember Kelly, you would get a better idea if you look at those, like 19, 20, 21, and 22, which are less, yeah, excluding it, there is no bond issue in that year.
And could you tell us which year each of these started? Or is that there, am I missing it?
I mean, I don't know the exact dates. I
So we
don't
just
know
said that Howard Ridge expires in 2028, so what is it, 21?
even a year before that.
West Evanston expires in
Other two
2027.
TIFs are relatively new, obviously 550, you guys all know that.
Yeah.
But the other two, Chicago, Maine, and Dempster Dodge, it's only, I think, 6 years or so out of 23.
Yeah.
So we have a long way to go there.
Do you have those start dates for each one of those?
We can bring it up from the budget. I think in the budget, we put under.
They're all 23 years, right, always?
Our website for the TIF districts definitely has it on there somewhere, but we do have
Okay.
a map on there that has the expiration dates for each of the TIFs. So you can just take that minus the life of a TIF, which is 23. So,
Right.
for instance, Howard Ridge expires in 2026, so it would have been started in
Yeah.
2003. So
And West Evanston? There's only 5 there.
West Evanston is
Expires.
2028.
2028, thank you.
Stir
And then, I'm
Dodge is
sorry,
2035, and
2035.
Chicago, Maine is 2036.
Chicago,
Can
Maine.
you say those numbers again?
We can share that, yeah. We can give you all the dates.
Chicago, Maine is 2036.
Correct.
Okay, and then the 5/5 just started, so
That expires in 2044.
2044. Thank you.
Okay, Jess, I think that's our entire agenda, isn't it? Okay, so can we adjourn? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.